Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio, sponsored by Pick Little Ian. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and with me, as always, is my cohort in crime, Judge Ray Jaffe. So, Judge, welcome back. As always,
thanks, John.
To speak to you. Yeah.
Great to be here for another week of NFL and fantasy football.
You know what's funny is now that we're in the season, we've been waiting. You know, we waited for weeks for the games to start. And now that the game started, I hardly even know what week it is. All I know is there's football coming up, and that's what's exciting about it. I lose track of the weeks.
It's a beautiful thing, and no buys yet, so you don't have to really worry about it too much. In a couple of weeks, we have to start thinking about what week we're in. But right now, just enjoy it.
Just enjoy it. Well, I'm enjoying the Eagles 2-0. There's a fantasy league where one of our members titled their team "Eagles Suck." So. And I'm glad to write. I did a write-up for that league that Eagles, he may think the Eagles suck, but they are 2-0, and he is not. So I'm glad I was able to get that in. And speaking of fantasy leagues, we do have our own Kick-Ass Fantasy Leagues for our website, www.kickassfantasyfootball.com. And it's manned by the staff and personalities from our site. And how did you do this week, Ray?
Well, the Judges team actually did quite well this week. And mentioned last time, John, the team I have was auto-drafted. I couldn't make the draft, so I've been toying with the experiment of really trying to do a bunch of trades and get it to be more tuned up in my image, or just sort of riding it and sort of like doing the monkey coin flip experiment and seeing how that goes. And this week it went well. Pounded my opponent, and really it was led by Eli. So Eli this week was out of his mind. Again, Eagles fan, but I've been, like many, or some on the show, but certainly I've been touting Eli Manning's fantasy horn for the last 2 years doing this show, and he led the entire league in scoring, obviously with the record-setting output of yardage, 48 points from Eli. So all good, 1-1 after this week.
Well, I have to admit there is a certain radio personality that you share the airwaves with who has had his doubts about Eli Manning. So I will have to give kudos to you. And even though it was an auto draft, you still have him, and you have touted him on the show before. And it was certainly an expressive display of aerial power from Eli Manning and the Giants last week. So, you have to give the shout-outs when they're well-deserved. So I'm glad you were able to ride him last week. I'm doubly glad that he did not display that talent the first week, because then I fear I would have lost.
Yeah, it was funny. It was an auto draft. I was keeping tabs on who was getting picked, and I was legitimately very happy when Eli Manning fell into my team, because I have been touting him, so I'll ride that horse.
So I have to ask, did you make any roster moves, or are you sticking strictly with the auto draft results, or how are you going to do it?
I did make one roster move, which wasn't a great move, and it wasn't a move that really impacts anything. I picked up Moss on a flyer just to see how that's going to play out in San Francisco, as they're going to a little bit more of a passing attack. He didn't do much this past week, but no trades and minimal movement. Actually, as it turns out, I have another player on that team that I'll be touting a little bit later in the show that I think might help me contribute. Might be a trade chip for later in the year.
Well, I wouldn't be the radio personality and partner in crime that you've come to know and love if I didn't say that after 1 week you're already picking up my leftovers, because I did drop Randy Moss after.
Oh, is that right? Well,
yes.
Who knew? Yes. Who knew? Well, you might be wiser than me on that one. I might be sort of thinking it's 5 years ago, but we'll see.
Well, no, it's interesting. And since this is a fantasy show, it's a good way to start. Randy Moss had a touchdown the first week, but the touchdown was in a completely blown coverage. I think he only saw 2 targets last week. So the name jumps out at you, and it's definitely worth a flyer. I didn't have the room in my roster. I made a move and needed to pick someone up, so I ended up dropping him. Obviously, I thought he might be worth a flyer to begin with. So it's not a bad call. It's just be careful with what you expect from him.
Yeah. So how did you do, John?
Well, I did end up winning. It was a close game, but I had Willis McGahee and Matt Ryan going.
Oh, so you pulled it out last night.
I did pull it out last night, and insert off-color joke here.
And you won the game.
And I won the game. So, all in all, it was a very good night. So, yeah, I was pretty pleased. And I'm still struggling with Chris Johnson. I actually have a league where my first two picks were Chris Johnson and Matt Forte. And in this league, my first two picks were Chris Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald, who only got 1 point last week. So there's definitely some hurting going on. And I did complete my weekly If Only article, and I did mention the abysmal week I had. I was 2-5 in my leagues. I picked New England for my survivor pool.
Well, you're not alone there. I had to just wipe out. I can't even imagine how many people that wiped out survivor pools. I mean, outrageous.
But between New England and New Orleans, we had 80 people drop out of our survivor pool last week.
And how many people are in the pool?
That was probably about half the pool. So
okay.
It's a little bit over. So and the funny thing is, I had mentioned that I was likely to go with the Giants. It came to be Friday, and I just didn't really want to think about it, so I said, I'll just throw New England in there. They're a safe pick. If I go back and look at it and want to change it, I will. And then I never went back, never changed it, and if I had just stuck with my guns, although the reasoning behind the Giants, not picking the Giants to begin with, was just wasn't sure how Tampa Bay seemed a little bit stronger this year, and it was a very close game. So
they were stronger for a half.
They were extremely stronger for a half, but obviously that didn't cut the mustard. So, but I did end up winning. I'm not going to say I have the strongest lineup at the moment. I'm waiting for some folks to take off a little bit more. I got some between Antonio Brown and Torrey Smith. I'm expecting a few more points each week, and it hasn't quite happened. So, but I'm still pleased with my lineup, and I'm 2-0, and so we'll see where it takes me.
Right on.
Right on. So let's take a look real quick, a little bit of news and some topics before we take our first break. And Michael Turner got a DUI after Monday night's game. So it's amazing still in this day and age, especially during the season, that these players get DUIs. And I don't know how much you've heard about it or what you know, and I'm wondering what potential impact is going to come out of it.
Well, it happened right after the game. Not much has come out about it yet, other than, the Falcons organization is recognizing that, it did happen. They're disappointed, and I think we'll see how it plays out. I will note that the judge jinx must be in full effect, because I picked Michael Turner as my dud last week. I thought I meant on the field, but apparently off the field as well he chose to be a dud, and went boozing it up and driving. So, with some of the, tougher rules around the collective bargaining agreement in the NFL, it could be. You have to watch this. Michael Turner could wind up missing some time here.
It's actually likely, and the team may even suspend him just for conduct detrimental to the team. So we'll see how that plays out, and which would obviously give a boost to Jacquizz Rodgers. So it's obviously a situation that we will need to monitor throughout the week. Let's move on real quick. So a positive note: Kellen Winslow signed with New England, which I find quite interesting, because obviously, as we get down to the injuries, Aaron Hernandez tweaked his ankle, which obviously is a little more than a tweak. But I'm not sure that the signing of Kellen Winslow really bodes that well for the status of Aaron Hernandez for any upcoming games.
Yeah, it's that 2 to 6 weeks is a pretty broad range for Hernandez. What we're hearing, and frankly, if it's closer to 6 weeks, that could become 7 to 8 weeks, because if he's really out of games that long, it's going to take him a while to work back in. So it could be significant. It's really interesting because Kellen Winslow, San Diego, New England likes the two tight end offense. Winslow's certainly a talented guy, and San Diego's sort of. Why do I keep saying San Diego? I'm thinking of his dad. I think Kevin Winslow, who would also probably could still play if he came out of retirement. But New England is reclamation central. And I would not be surprised to see Winslow sort of gain some level of relevance again.
Well, it's definitely a good point that they have brought in, for lack of a better term, some retreads who have, again, flourished in the New England system. They have a way of keeping the discipline amongst the players, keeping the egos in check, and, Kellen Winslow has had issues with both of those. But, I wouldn't be surprised. I was surprised when he got cut from Seattle, so I think there's a little bit more to it maybe than just his abilities. But so I wouldn't be surprised if he did have a little modicum of success under New England. As you mentioned, they do like the two tight end set. I think expecting Aaron Hernandez play is not going to happen, but so it's a boost to Rob Gronkowski. It may also be a boost to Wes Welker, but for tight ends, for mix and match games, Kellen Winslow might be a valid fantasy play.
Yeah, it's worth watching, and even seeing how many targets he's going to wind up getting, and if he's getting 4 or 5 targets in that offense, it might be worth a flyer.
Might be worth a flyer, and tight end's a position this year that obviously you have the kings of the hill, and Gronkowski or Hernandez would have been there. He's going to be out. Jimmy Graham, and I'm going to throw Vernon Davis in there, especially after his performance on Monday night. And after that, there's some solid tight ends, some tight ends who have ups and down games. So there's really a pretty good depth of the second, third tier tight ends this year, and I think we'll have to see if Kellen Winslow can add his name to the mix. A couple other bits of news just to make sure that when you're filling out your rosters that you are aware of. Ryan Matthews should play this week. There was indications that he may play last week. It seemed a little early, but he is back practicing, and in all likelihood we'll see the field this week. And then Darrelle Revis will most likely not play, and I think that is significant. We saw what Pittsburgh was able to do through the air to New York. And so with Darrelle Revis not in the lineup, that's always a possibility that New York Jets get torched a little bit through the air. So just keep that in mind when you're playing your fantasy teams, and we're also going to mention that a little bit later in the show.
Yeah, I think, Revis being out, Miami, Tannehill, I don't know how much that'll help him a little bit. I still don't know that there's a lot there. Ryan Matthews, San Diego, got the offense clicking last week, although the running back was certainly by committee. Will be great to have him back. Probably limited carries if he's back, but certainly all-around back, and probably worth getting into your lineups again, assuming later in the week you hear he's at least going to get 15 or so touches in the game.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what, it looks like we have our standby jersey in the house on hold. So let's get to him, and then we'll get to the break. So jersey in the house, you are on the air. It's Jumpin' John, and why don't you shoot us with a fantasy question or two?
Hey, gentlemen, how you doing? Hey, I fared well. I went 2-0 in both my leagues. Junior's got a situation. He's 1-1. His dilemma is he's in our PPR league. We get 10-point rushing touchdown. He's got Doug Martin. It's not an issue. That's a start from Freddie Jackson's hurt. So the only other backs he has is Toby Gerhart, and he's got Mendenhall, but Mendenhall might not play. Does he put in, for the waiver wire, does he drop Gerhart? He tried to trade Gerhart to a guy that had Peterson for, Redmond. The guy didn't want to do all the stuff. So does he drop him and get that Brown guy from New England, or does he go after Richardson? Because it looks like New England has a nice matchup. What's your feeling? Because he's kind of hurting at running back.
Well, since we're still unsure what's happening with Ahmad Bradshaw, I've actually put in some waivers for Andre Brown myself this week, and it doesn't sound like Bradshaw's going to play. Especially, I believe they're on a short week this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah, so it's some type of head injury, neck injury, and you always want to be careful with that. So I'm thinking Andre Brown will see some work. You never know. Obviously that he came up by surprise, so I think he's worth a flyer. You might want to look at the situation with, Steven Jackson and Darrell Richardson. We'll go that with some injury stuff, and maybe pick up Jonathan Dwyer. I know Redmond got the touchdown. He looked better last week, but all through the preseason we've been touting Jonathan Dwyer as the actual Steeler running back to own without Mendenhall.
And I'll give you another one if he's available out there. I think he's going to be coming back this week. Michael LaSure from the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, somebody already got him. Somebody took him a couple of weeks ago. They instead of carrying 4 receivers, they took 3 receivers and 5 running backs. Because I think that same guy had Smith. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Kind of like what I did. I knew Forte was going down, so I got Michael Bush. So I'll tell Junior to try to put him for Brown. If you can't get him, then put him for Richardson, and just go the way it goes. Now, what I was thinking about doing with my team, I was going to go. I'm not sure. I'm definitely going Michael Bush. I got Ridley and I got Matthews. Do I need to wait a week for Matthews? So I think he's going against the Falcons. And the defense didn't look too bad, but what's called did run against them, McGahee. But you take a shot on Ridley going against Pittsburgh's defense. I'm not sure how tough the Pittsburgh's defense is against the run.
I think Ridley actually has Baltimore coming up this week.
Baltimore. Yeah, Baltimore.
I liked Ridley a lot last week, and unfortunately the game just didn't go the way I think anyone expected. He actually touched the ball a lot in the first half. It seems like he is going to be more of a feature back in New England than they've had in a while. So, in 2 weeks from now, it's a no-brainer you start Matthews. But I think I still lean towards Ridley for this upcoming week.
It's hard when someone's coming off an injury and you're not sure how much he's going to play. If Matthews goes off, you're going to shoot yourself for not starting him. But definitely the safer call is go with Ridley.
Because Ridley's a good option. I mean, if you had a weaker option, if you're in your son's situation, then you definitely roll the dice with Matthews. But you have a very good.
I got a pretty good team. I got Brady, but he hasn't produced. I got Brady. I got Michael Bush. I got Ridley. I got Matthews. I can use if I have to. I got Vernon Davis. I got Jennings. I got Cruz. I got Malcolm Floyd, who was a great pickup. I got Vernon Davis. I got the 49ers defense. I got a nice team. So I got some options I can play with. It's just making sure you pick the right person that week, which sometimes can, works out good, sometimes not. Now, my last question, I'll let you go. In my PPR, Cruz is a no-brainer. Now, do I still stay with Malcolm Floyd? I picked him up last week. He gave me 21 points. And I also have Jennings. My other option is Kenny Britt, but I'm not going to play Britt for a while. Do I stay with Floyd and see what Jennings does this week? Because Seattle's defense is not a bad defense. They did a pretty good job against Dallas when they're at Seattle, and I believe that's where it's at. But I don't want to overhype things. But do you like me to stay with Floyd, or do you plug in Jennings if he's a go?
I would stay with Floyd this week. I sort of was seeing a little bit of a down year for Jennings. I don't know why, but I just think with all the options at Green Bay, and he's sort of maybe slowed up a little bit by the injuries. I mean, he's still a very good receiver, but Floyd against Atlanta, Atlanta's going to score points. I can see a lot of points being scored in that game. I think I'd go Floyd.
Okay. All right, I'll definitely do that. Hey guys, I appreciate it. So it's always a pleasure talking with you guys. You guys are great. You kind of give me a little bit of advice there to tweak some things to do it, and I really appreciate that. Hopefully I get Junior 2-1, and hopefully I go 3-0 in both my leagues. So again, best of luck to you guys this week, and thanks for your advice again. Have a safe night. Take care.
Good luck, Jersey.
All right, good luck, Jersey. Thanks for the call, and we'll talk to you later.
Yep, take care.
All right, we're running up against the break, so we're going to take our commercials and be back in 2 minutes. Don't forget, we do have a call-in line, 877-511-1024. And when we get back, we'll have a guest, and then we'll get to the rest of our show. We'll get to some injuries and some ads for you, and then there's a couple players I'm going to throw out for you, Ray, to tell me if they're for real or not. And so we'll be back in 2 minutes. I'm Jumpin' John with Judge Ray Jaffe, and this is the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Blog Talk Radio.
Now is your chance to experience the new game that's transforming fantasy sports. Fantasy Player Exchange is a new daily game that allows you to compete against friends and fantasy foes for cash prizes. With FPX, you can select 5 players from any active sport. Sign up now at fantasyplayerexchange.com for your chance to beat ESPN Radio's Henry the Commish Brick and win $1,000 cash. Go to fantasyplayerexchange.com to sign up and play today. Remember, that's fantasyplayerexchange.com.
I'm sexy and I know it.
Car Toys, the most innovative car customizing shop in its class. Summer is here, and so's the heat. Better get that remote start so you can cool off in your car in style with your smartphone. Car Toys can install remote start on Mercedes-Benz, push-button start, and stick shift. Reduce that glare with the best 3M window film. And while you're at it, get your car detailed by Car Toys Detail Department so your ride looks, feels, and smells brand new. Car Toys defines what everything for your car really means, from TV to reality. That's why Car Toys is the leader in the industry in car customization. Car Toys' knowledgeable team are the best in their class. Like Car Toys on Facebook and check them out at distinctivecartoys.com.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for two to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and Judge Ray Jaffe, my partner in crime, is with me as always. So we're back. We got about 45 minutes or 40 minutes left, and we have a special guest with us. So, Victor, you're on the air with the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show, hosted by Vic Lillian. So why don't you talk a little bit? We talked last week about your sponsorship for the Beat the Commish, and what I want to really know is how much money does the Commish owe you right now?
Well, first I want to thank you guys for having me on. And the Commish did not win again last week. He did have some people beat him, so he's 0 for 2 right now. I thought he was going to go undefeated the way he made it sound at the beginning, and he hasn't won one yet.
Love it. Well, hopefully he can keep that streak alive, and people will join up onto the Fantasy Player Exchange and reap the Commish's shortcomings. Although I think he had a better week this week, but not quite enough.
Yes, he actually did have a much better week this week. He was number 2, so not number 1, but he was definitely much closer than the bottom like he was last week. But I just want to let everybody know. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when he was talking to you, it sounded like he was going to go undefeated. When he was talking to us, it sounded like we were all getting new cars and we're going to be able to quit our jobs and be on ESPN for the rest of our lives. But so, it's always good to shoot for the stars, right?
Exactly. Hey, if that's what he believes.
So it's interesting. So the site and I actually joined on. I did quite poorly my first week, so maybe it's a first week thing. But it is fun. And there's a lot of strategy involved, Victor, because I noticed, the winner, at least of the Beat the Commish pool, went all in on Reggie Bush basically, and that's sort of that came up all aces.
Correct. Well, there's a few basic strategies that work, I think, pretty well. One of them is checking to see what kind of defense someone's playing. So, for instance, a guy like Fitzpatrick this week had a pretty decent week considering he had a horrible week last week. You had, some guys that you just would never expect to do anything. They just had pretty good weeks. Reggie Bush definitely was the person who won had 16 shares of him. And because he had a return on investment of 72%, that really helped his total return, which is why I believe that person was number 1. The way that I suggest to people is making sure you're doing your research. You're not just going to pick a name because you know how it is. As in any fantasy sports game, you would figure that. But you want to make sure you're not going up against a strong defense, or a guy might be really low valued because he had just a rough week the prior week, but he's typically a higher value.
Now, I think I've also seen some non-football players in some of these games. So tell us about that a little bit. You got multiple sports in play here.
Correct. Well, that's what makes Fantasy Player Exchange completely different than most other daily sports games, is that you can have any of the 4 major sports right now. Any player that is active from any sport can be chosen onto your lineup. All you have to do is have 5 minimum players. You have to purchase 20 shares and spend between $1,000 and $1,200 of our play money. And like I said, our main difference is that you can have the basketball season coming up in about a month. You could technically have, a baseball player if the World Series is still going on. You could have a football player, if it's a Thursday night or a Sunday game, and you can have a basketball player all on the same team. So you can have LeBron James, Derek Jeter, and Aaron Rodgers all on the same team. And like I said, I might not suggest that their value might be overvalued at that point, but you can theoretically have the 5 best players if you wanted on the same team.
Yeah, it's a great idea. It's very interesting strategy involved here, how you want to play it, and it only gets more interesting as some of these other sports get going.
Correct. I mean, one of the things that I want everybody to understand about the game that I think, like I said, besides the multi-sport aspect, is that it's an investment. It's not a typical fantasy sports game. You're actually investing in that player for that day. So you feel that player is going to just have a crazy day. You're going to put more value into that player. You're going to buy more shares of him. And I think that also changes compared to other daily sports games also.
And it's a daily game. So if it's Saturday night and I want to play this, I can I'll have the Sunday game, so I can pick Jimmy Rollins, and I can pick someone from the NFL, and we'll total up what they do on Sunday and get a result, and you can play again Monday if you want. Is that the idea?
That is it. I mean, we actually have a many different games. We have from a free game that it's called the Daily Free Roll, that people can just go up to FPX fantasyplayerexchange.com right now and just sign up to be in your free roll. We're giving anybody could sign up. It'll be a free game, and they can still win cash prizes. Other than that, we still have head-to-head games, we have games low as $1 and $2, and then we have other games that some people are going for $50 games right now. $50 head-to-head games. We have games that you could put in $5 and up to depending on how many people play, up to like $300 in prize money. So there's all different values. You don't have to go crazy and spend $10 at a time. You could start on the $1 game, $2 games, which we give different options.
And the Beat the Commish is a $2 game, correct?
Correct. That's a $2 game that is done every Sunday for the next up until the end of the football season.
Good stuff.
Cool. The opportunity to beat the commish on a weekly basis, I think, is fantastic. So I think everyone needs. Go ahead, Victor.
I think the best thing about it is each week when they beat the commish, whoever has the highest rate of return is going to win $50. And I mean, anybody can go on to our website right now. The season won last week, but I'm going to tell you guys firsthand that whoever is commissions going down was number 1 last week, and they had the highest return investment at 58%, and they won $50 cash.
I love it. Great name, too.
Yeah. And at the end of the season, whoever had the highest return on investment is going to win $1,000 cash. So all it means is one person had to have one really crazy good week, and they could still win that $1,000. They don't have to play every week. The most important thing to know is if you have that one great game where you just, you picked all the right players, you picked all the guys that no one expected to do anything, and they just all went crazy, and all you have to have is that week, and you win, and you can win that $1,000.
I'll tell you, $50 weekly, $1,000 at the end of the year, it's a great deal. So I think everyone needs to go to Fantasy Player Exchange and beat the commish. So.
Cool. Well, we hope to see all of you there. I hope that everybody goes check it out. Once again, it's fantasyplayerexchange.com. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/fantasyplayerexchange. And hope everybody goes and check it out.
Yeah, it's a great site. I've been on it, signed up, and it is a lot of fun. It's something you can it's always there for you. Even it's a very inexpensive way to get some action on games, have some fun with it, and test your sports IQ. So good stuff, Victor.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks a lot, Victor. Appreciate the call.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, Judge. So I'll tell you what, got a couple questions for you. Maybe you can give me some answers, and then we'll go up against our next break, and then move on to our third segment. But first of all, Patriots losing. I mean, we mentioned that at the top of the show. I had them in my survival pool. I mean, does it mean anything? Is it just it's an early year kind of thing? Is it Arizona? Is it New England? What's the deal with the Patriots losing? What do you see from it?
I think I'm still going to have to chalk it up to an early year thing. Even though Tennessee's looked very bad this first two games, New England handled Tennessee very easily week one. I think it's just one of these which New England doesn't really have many of, but just they weren't really all there for the game. I think it's the first time they've lost a home opener in I don't know when. Years, maybe decades. And no, I don't think Arizona's all that either. I think Arizona might have an okay defense. I think the offense is still smoke and mirrors. You don't have me. I'm not a Kevin Cobb believer after this game. So I think it's just sort of a perfect storm for Arizona, and I think we'll sort of see things righted next week. Now, New England's going to have a very tough game against the Ravens coming off that loss. So it's possible New England could be 1-2 after week 3.
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, and Baltimore's upset with the way they lost the Eagles. They were upset with the refereeing. There was a physical game, and I think the Ravens are going to be coming out looking for blood. So, and the next live body is New England. So that's a very good point. I would assume a high-scoring affair next week. What do you think?
With the Ravens and Patriots,
yeah.
You wouldn't. Traditionally you hear Baltimore and you don't think high scoring, but I just think the way that they're now approaching the game from an offensive standpoint is actually going to lead to, it's going to lead to more offensive scoring for the Ravens. It's probably going to lead to more scoring against them too, with going to a lot of no huddle or what's the word that you call it? Sort of a
hurry up offense.
It's a hurry up, but it's a mush huddle. Like it's not like a pure no huddle, but they just sort of stand around and don't let the defense make subs, even though they're not running up to the line. But it also is going to get the offense, either able to score or get off the field quicker, so the defense will be on more. So yeah, I think even though traditionally Baltimore vaunted defense, I think the Patriots will be more in tune offensively. So I would look at that as an opportunity to get some fancy players in for sure playing. I think there will be some points scored.
All right, great. I got two running backs I'm going to throw at you, and I'm just wondering what to do with them. One's on his way up and one's on his way down. So let's start with Ben Tate. I played him in my first game in another league and lost if I would have not played him, and I lost again if I would have played him in my second week because I had him on my bench. So what do you do with Ben Tate? I mean, is he a weekly play at flex? Do you wait for the opponent? How do you handle Ben Tate?
Boy, how do you handle Ben Tate? That's a great question. There hasn't been one of these situations in a long time where clearly he's the number 2 running back, but he does get enough touches to bring him into consideration as a play. I still think you sort of have to. I still think you sort of have to hold back on him, unless even we had a call earlier today. They had a real, and we didn't mention Ben Tate, and we're going to assume that probably he's taken that league. But if you have a running back dilemma, maybe you put in Tate. But it's a tough one because Arian Foster is the guy. I mean, he had the most running back touches in the league last week. He's a workhorse, but still somehow they find these touches for Tate. Boy, I don't know. I think you got to handle it matchup by matchup.
Okay, and I think the way it's coming out as, if you have nothing else for flex, he's definitely worth a flyer on the flex based on the amount of points he could get you. But I think it's more of, which was surprising the first week, but it's a weaker team. and they're going to be blowing him out. He'll more likely get more touches. So definitely, as you mentioned, a matchup's call. The next running back is on his way down, Chris Johnson. I mean, what do you do with him? I went all in on him. I was high on him at the beginning of the year. It's still early, but what would you do with Chris Johnson?
You know, John, I feel like we're having deja vu all over again. These are exactly the conversations we had last year about Chris Johnson.
Yes, it is.
Yes, you know, I wasn't as high on him coming into the year, but not being as high on him still meant I still thought he was going to be a top 10 running back. So I think you have to let this thing play out. You know, we saw some of the same things last year attributed to the holdout and not being ready to go. I don't know what to attribute to it this year. I actually saw a stat where I don't know if you saw this, John, he by far and away leads the league in earliest contact from time of handoff. So they have a stat saying that you know, how far downfield are they the first time they get contact on average?
Right.
He's actually negative 0.2 yards. He's averaging getting hit before he gets to the line of scrimmage. So he's getting zero offensive line protection in front of him. You know, Locker has not been able to do enough through the air yet to really sort of draw attention from him. All that being said, you know, you got him as one of your horses, so I think you still have to ride him out for at least a couple more weeks and see where it takes you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously you're right. You almost have to, depending on who you have, and you may have some other options. Like I was able to get Benson and McGahee in a lot of my leagues, so could supplant him as a starter. But the fact is, and once he turns the switch, it's going to be pretty good. And you think with Mike Munchak as the coach, I mean, he was an offensive lineman, and you know, went to Penn State, nice little plug there. So you think that, you know, it's going to click for them at some point, but you're right, the offensive line play definitely has had a lot to do with it. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle them, you know, against Detroit. It's going to be a high-scoring affair, but you know, I'm not sure they're a very good, aggressive pass defense, but as a run defense, I'm not sure they're the best. So it'll be good to see how they use him. You know, whether you sit him for a better option this week or not. If he doesn't go off this week, they got Houston in week 4, and you know, so that's not a great matchup either. So you know, definitely an iffy week this week, and this will really determine how you're going to use him, at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's the interesting case of Chris Johnson. Here we are again 1 year later.
Yeah, well, you know, we talked about Randy Moss. There's Chris Johnson, and definitely hitting on some of my player favorites there. So, tell you what, we're running up against the break. We're going to take another set of commercials, and we do have our guest call-in line at 877-511-1024. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and Judge Ray Jaffe is by my side. So we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Listen up, fantasy football owners. If you want top quality, guaranteed authentic sports memorabilia, there's only one place to go. Prestige Sports Marketing. They offer autographed baseball and football jerseys, framed jerseys, helmets, bags, photos, and amazing artwork. They're 100% guaranteed authentic, so you can feel 100% confident. Check out Prestige Sports Marketing at PrestigeSportsMKTG.com. That's PrestigeSportsMKTG.com. Enter promo code ESPN to get 10% off.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the Professor,
and me, the Commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Now is your chance to experience the new game that's transforming fantasy sports. Fantasy Player Exchange is a new daily game that allows you to compete against friends and fantasy foes for cash prizes. With FPX, you can select 5 players from any active sport. Sign up now at fantasyplayerexchange.com for your chance to beat ESPN Radio's Henry the Commish Brick and win $1,000 cash. Go to fantasyplayerexchange.com to sign up and play today. Remember, that's fantasyplayerexchange.com.
I'm sexy and I know it.
Car Toys, the most innovative car customizing shop in its class. Summer is here, and so's the heat. Better get that remote start so you can cool off in your car in style with your smartphone. Car Toys can install remote start in Mercedes-Benz, push-button start, and stick shift. Reduce that glare with the best 3M window film. And while you're at it, get your car detailed by Car Toys Detail Department so your ride looks, feels, and smells brand new. Car Toys defines what everything for your car really means, from TV to reality. That's why Car Toys is the leader in the industry in car customization. Car Toys' knowledgeable team are the best in their class. Like Car Toys on Facebook and check them out at distinctivecartoys.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Pickle Ian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Jumpin' John Prevost, and Judge Ray Jaffe. So, an hour goes fast. We're a couple segments away from coming up to the hour break, so let's push through for the rest of our show. And I got a couple names I'm going to throw out at you, Ray, and I want to know if they're for real. So Eli Manning, he threw for 510 yards and 3 touchdowns last game. I think I know your answer to this, but is Eli Manning for real?
Oh, yeah, I love Eli. He is for real.
Now, do you love Eli as much as you love Bush?
Well, it depends which Bush we're talking about. Which Bush are we talking about?
We all know our proclivity for affection for Michael Bush, but the next Bush in line that we can hit is Reggie Bush, 170 yards touchdowns and 25 yards receiving this week.
There's a lot of Bush in the NFL right now. A lot of productive Bush, actually. Yeah, for real. 29. He had the second most touches in the NFL last week for a running back. Well, second most touches period. 29 touches. They're using him. He has arrived. He had a big second half last year. Bush is legit. Bush is real.
So you're all in on Bush.
I am all in on Bush.
Good to know. Trent Richardson got bottled up by the Eagles week 1. Came out last week against a depleted Cincinnati defense. 109 yards and a touchdown rushing, 36 yards and a touchdown receiving. Is Trent Richardson for real?
I do think he's for real. I liked him coming into the year quite a bit. I still think you might get a little bit of inconsistency from Richardson, but he's a play. I think he's going to be play on almost every week.
All right. And the last one I want to throw at you, Danny Amendola, 15 catches for 160 yards and a touchdown.
15 catches, and he was only targeted, I think, 16 times. So they pretty much were perfection or close to it. He's Wes Welker. He has always got to be Wes Welker. That's the idea with Amendola. I mean, that's who he's going to be. He's going to be, 10, 12 yards a catch, scatter guy. And in a PPR league, no question about it. Play him.
All right. Yeah, it's definitely kind of surprising coming from St. Louis, and maybe they actually have an offense there that you can rely on. Let's go through some of the injuries real quick. A couple of them we know are going to be out for missing some time, and a couple of these I'm not really sure what their status is. They seem to be more day-to-day or week-to-week. Matt Forte, obviously, he has, which is now not being classified as a high ankle sprain. He's out for 2 to 6 weeks. And then another ankle, Aaron Hernandez, he's also going to be out for 2 to 6 weeks, and we mentioned him before with the Kellen Winslow signing. A couple of running backs that you want to keep your eye on. Steven Jackson, this is an interesting one. I'm not even really sure what he hurt or if he hurt anything. There's been talk that it was his groin, his hamstring, his quad. There's also been talk that he's just kind of in the doghouse for showing some lack of control on the field. So, have you any updates on Steven Jackson, or what have you heard, Ray?
No updates yet. But if it is a legitimate injury, certainly look, and we'll talk in a minute here about some of the possible replacements. But that could be a real opportunity to comb the waiver wire.
And then another opportunity is Ahmad Bradshaw. He's more of a neck injury, I guess it was, something obviously above the shoulders, which may be the reason why he's been fumbling a lot in the past. Is he's always had a problem above the shoulders, but I'm not sure he's going to play with the short week.
Yeah, that definitely, the short week definitely hurts Bradshaw. It would a lot better chance if it was a Sunday game. It's not, so I think it's fairly likely that he will not play this Thursday.
And then the next starter that most people might have in their lineup is Jeremy Maclin. He had a hip injury, came in, caught a pass or two, had a touchdown, and then went back out with a hip injury. So I'm wondering what his availability is. I'm not thinking it's great for this week.
Right, and he was sort of hurt coming into the game, like you said, John, and just sort of got worse. So I would be surprised if Maclin plays. I don't know that that's going to create an opportunity to pick anyone up. So, Selleck, if you're going to pick anyone up, you're going to pick up Selleck from the tight end position. Deshaun Jackson will get his. You have Avant filling in. The Eagles apparently worked out 2 mystery wide receivers today, so they might have someone joining the team, but I think as a third or fourth receiver.
Well, there were tweets from Chad Johnson that he's going to Philadelphia. The team denied if he worked out for him, so we'll see if anything like that plays out. Full disclosure, Ray, I'm sure you're going to get a kick out of this. I started fantasy leagues for each of my sons this year. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, so it's their first time going into fantasy football. And I'm trying not to do the lineups for him, but I am trying to help him. But I will say I think I lost the game for my youngest son this week because I sat Jeremy Maclin. I wasn't sure what his status was, and I went all in on Alshon Jeffrey this week with the Bears.
I think we'll talk about that in a little bit here, John.
Okay, I think we will.
Mr. Jeffrey. I'm sure, as your sons say with a dad like you, who needs enemies?
So, something like that. So he lost by 6 points. So, anyhow, let's move on, shall we? A couple other injuries of note just to keep an eye on. No fantasy starts here. Sean Green, Eddie Royal, and Kevin Boss all had some injuries and may miss some time. The one thing you do want to keep an eye on or make note of is both Brian Orakpo and Adam Carricker for Washington. They're defensive stars on the Washington Redskins. They are both out for the year, so I think that only bodes well for NFC East teams that come in and are playing them twice a year. So keep that in mind when you're making your fantasy lineups.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, Forte is out. Same scenario happened last year when Michael Bush was on the Raiders. McFadden was out. Michael Bush was phenomenal. So if you have Bush as a handcuff, or even if you just have him as a flyer back that you picked up that Forte might get hurt, definitely would get him in your starting lineups. He has proven that he can step in and be a big back. Yeah,
unfortunately, I did make the mistake of not drafting him to back up Forte in my one league, and I am regretting that. So just lessons learned.
Well, lots of people love Bush, so it's hard to get him as a handcuff sometimes.
Bush is very popular, definitely, even in Lancaster. All right, let's go through a couple ads real quick. We mentioned some injury issues, and so let's take a note. Daryl Richardson came in for an injured Steven Jackson, had about 80 yards, I think on about 15 carries, so he did really well in mop-up duty. Andre Brown was the surprise running back when Ahmad Bradshaw went out. So I think those are two running backs that you're going to definitely want to add to your roster, not knowing what the status is of their starting running backs. What do you think about that, Ray?
Yeah, no, I agree on both fronts. Brown certainly came in, did very well for Bradshaw, and like we said, it looks like Bradshaw probably won't play this Thursday, so if you need to squeeze someone in, it could be the time to do it. And Richardson clearly was the backup to Jackson. Over the more highly touted, running back that they drafted, but Richardson, the 6th-round pick, is the guy. So if Jackson's not going to play, Richardson will.
And we mentioned Danny Amendola for St. Louis. I think he's definitely worth a pick up, especially in the PPR league. A couple other receivers that you want to look at, you may want to pick up if you have the roster space. The thing about receivers, there's definitely a churn, especially in the beginning of the year. You're always trying to find out the next breakout player. A couple of ones to keep your eye on: Brian Hartline from Miami, Andrew Hawkins from Cincinnati, and Donnie Avery from Indianapolis are some receivers that you want to think about adding to your team. And then one tight end I wanted to mention, I said earlier, there's definitely a lot of tight ends that are kind of in that mid-tier range that can keep you afloat on your fantasy team, get a couple catches, 40, 60 yards, and maybe a touchdown. Dante Rosario came in for San Diego, Gates was a sort of surprise scratch. Rosario came in and caught 3 touchdown passes for San Diego. So I think the way that San Diego uses their tight end, and especially since they really don't have any true stars at receiver, I think Dante Rosario is a tight end that you want to get on your roster.
And then 2 more ads to add to that list. John, Dennis Pitta from Baltimore, if he's not taken, 15 targets last week. They're absolutely, they're moving to a tight end based offense between Dixon and Pitta. So look at Pitta. And with the news about Michael Turner, DUI, want to look at picking up Jack Hayes Rogers, as Turner could miss some time. As this sort of the legal matters play out.
All right, and then for any 2 quarterback leagues or for bye weeks, there's a couple quarterbacks to think about. Christian Ponder, surprisingly, he's averaged 250 yards and a touchdown. Sam Bradford, as we mentioned, threw for 320 yards, 3 touchdowns. Then Carson Palmer has quietly had couple 300-yard game last week, and he's thrown the ball well. Once he starts scoring some touchdowns, I think you'll see him moving up in the fantasy spotlight. So let's do this, Judge. Let's take our last commercial break, and then we'll come back and get to our favorite part of the show, and that's studs, and sleepers. So, and we have a lot to talk about there, don't we?
We do.
We do. All right, so we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95, and we'll throw in a complimentary cruise for 2 to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Listen up, fantasy football owners. If you want top quality, guaranteed authentic sports memorabilia, there's only one place to go. Prestige Sports Marketing. They offer autographed baseball and football jerseys, framed jerseys, helmets, bats, photos, and amazing artwork. They're 100% guaranteed authentic, so you can feel 100% confident. Check out Prestige Sports Marketing at PrestigeSportsMKTG.com. That's PrestigeSportsMKTG.com. Enter promo code ESPN and get 10% off.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at KickassFantasyFootball.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Piccolo Ian Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. Jumpin' John Prevost here with Judge Ray Jaffe, and we're about ready to get into our favorite segment with these studs, and sleepers. Just want to remind everyone that we do have a call-in line at 877-511-1024. All right, Ray, so I think we're going to have a lot to talk about. There's studs, and sleepers. So let's do a quick review. Stephen Ridley, I believe, was mentioned as a stud last week. And how did he do?
I did have Ridley as a stud. I threw out there I thought he was going to go for at least 150 total yards and a touchdown. He went for 71 rushing, 24 receiving, so 95 total yards. And, a little unfortunate the game went the way it did because I think the thought was right, to tell you the truth. Ridley got the ball an awful lot for a New England running back in the first half of that game. And then being behind, they had to curtail that some. He did also have 3 catches, I believe, so he had a couple more points PPR. So it's certainly not a stud-like performance, although I do think Ridley minimally has solidified his position as more of a go-to back for New England than they've had in recent years.
No, I agree, and I think just the game dictated things a little different. I think Ridley is definitely a starter on a fantasy team. I mean, unless, it's definitely a possibility that you got him in a later round. So you may have some better options, but I can't believe there's that many teams that have two running backs or three, depending on what your format is, that you're going to start week in and week out above Ridley. I went with Adrian Peterson. I saw that tasty Indy defense going against, and I was expecting a couple touchdowns and over 100 yards, and he had 60 yards and rushing, 20 receiving, and no touchdowns. So my stud was more of a dud. Yeah. AP. Again, those numbers for another back, you'd say, all right, I can live with it. But yeah, for AP, you're looking for more. All right. So speaking of duds, and we mentioned him earlier in the show, and more of a dud for off the field issues, but that's right. Michael Turner was my dud, and I was. Cause I like to feel smart. We like to always feel smart and get these things right. And I was so angry last night when, Atlanta had one of the many interceptions against Peyton Manning, and the guy got tackled at the 1 yard line. I was like, oh, come on. This is going to be a cheap touchdown for Turner. And on his third attempt, he did get in the end zone. So it's hard to say he's a total dud because he scored on that gimme. But other than that, 17 for 42 yards, 2.5 rushing average. So and one catch for no yards. So yardage-wise, he clearly was a dud. He did get that cheap touchdown. So, what are you going to do? He's definitely not Michael Turner of old, and I think the dud category, especially where a lot of people may have drafted him this year, he's definitely going to fill that dud role. He didn't look great, and, again, 3 tries, 1 yard, and I think maybe that's how you have to temper your expectations with him, that he may get those short touchdowns, but maybe not expect too much else from him. So I went with Kevin Smith. I expected pain and injury against a tough San Francisco defense. However you want to look at it, he had 53 yards rushing, 17 receiving. Not a great day. And obviously since they lost, not enough against San Francisco. So we'll kind of call that a push. It's not a great dud, but definitely did not have a great game. So let's go with the sleepers, because I think we've got a little bit to talk about here. So who was your sleeper from last week? My sleeper was Michael Crabtree, and he had 6 catches for 67 yards. So again, a couple of this week were sort of like, I thought he'd have 100 yards receiving. I thought he might get into the end zone. I was actually really optimistic on that last touchdown they scored. I actually thought it might have been Crabtree for a second, but it was Vernon Davis again. So 6 for 67. If you're in a PPR, he actually probably outperformed what you would have expected, but certainly, he didn't set the world on fire. He didn't, but I tell you what, he's really setting that San Francisco offense on fire. And just because the numbers don't show it, obviously Vernon Davis is a true stud at tight end. But I think Michael Crabtree helps make that offense go as well, because he gives that that threat that they've kind of lacked in the past, and that allows Vernon Davis to get open. That's allowing Frank Gore to have a little more room to run. So although the numbers didn't show it, I truly think Crabtree is really helping that San Francisco offense. So good call on that sleeper. My sleepers, to quote myself from last year, Alshon Jeffrey is still asleep. Yes, he is. But you weren't alone. A lot of people were high on Jeffrey coming into last week. I mean, he had a great week the first week. I thought, he's really going to follow that up. Packers defense has the tradition of getting torched. I thought it was going to be a high-scoring game. And he really, not only did he kill me in about at least 3 fantasy leagues, but he killed my son as well. So, bad dad, very bad dad, and I'm hoping to be punished later. And John, can you just lay those stats on us, please, for the record? He had 1 catch for 7 yards. You know what the good news is? Can't get any worse? Well, you could have picked yourself, and you would have only had no catches for no yards. So, he got you 0.7 more fantasy points. Well, no, I mean, in the PPR, he would have gotten 1 point. But other than that, he really didn't score any better than I did last week.
Well, that's true. That's true. And no PPR if he's played it flat. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so no scoring for me last week. So I'll tell you what. Let's go real quick through our studs, and sleepers for this week. Why don't you go ahead? Actually, I like your stud pick this week. I was thinking of him myself. So who are you going with?
I'm going with A.J. Green, who is a stud receiver. I think he's going to have a big week. Dalton looked really good last week. Green only had a okay week, so I think he'll break out. Washington's defense, what are they, third worst against the pass after 2 weeks, but they do score high scoring. A.J. Green, big week.
All right, and I'm actually liking Tony Romo this week. Tampa gave up 300 yards and a touchdown the first week and 510 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. So look for a bounce back from Tony Romo. With dud, we mentioned Reggie Bush. I'm going out on a limb. I'm going to say he's a dud this week.
Wow.
I don't have the same faith in him as you do. I still love Bush, but I want to see more. So I'm hoping I do see more Bush, but I'm thinking this week I won't see any. So New York Jets led up 195 yards and a touchdown against Buffalo, but a lot of that was in garbage time. And then last week they only led up 66 yards rushing against the Steelers, although they did get a touchdown. So I'm thinking they're going to shut him down, and Miami's going to try and attack through the air with Revis out.
Gutsy call. I'm going to go with Adrian Peterson as a dud this week. And it has nothing to do with Adrian Peterson. It has to do with my respect for the San Francisco 49ers defense. This might be my fallback position all year long. Take the running back who's going against San Francisco as a dud. We'll see if it plays out this week.
All right. So how about sleeper? Let's see how you do this week.
And sleeper, and you got to check to make sure this guy's playing. But Michael LaSure is supposed to be eligible and be back for Detroit this week. It's a very favorable matchup against the Titans. Titans third or worst against the run so far. I think the idea is LaSure will get a fair amount of snaps. I think they sort of penciled him in. They like him to be the starter. So check if Michael LaSure is playing. I'd get him in there as a flex player.
That's a sneaky and gutsy call, so I may take your advice. I have him in a league or two, and I'm going to check his status. My sleeper is Donald Brown. Jacksonville has given up 339 yards on the ground and 5 touchdowns in the past 2 games. So no Indy isn't necessarily a running team, and Donald Brown's not the greatest back, but what are your expectations for him? So I
like it. I think Luck's already going to start getting some people out of the box. He's shown he's already able to pass the ball.
Definitely proven himself, and it's going to spread out the offense and give some room for Donald Brown to run. So those are our studs, and sleepers for the week. Once again, Ray, it's been a great hour hosting the Piccolo Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show. And I enjoy answering with you, and an hour's probably not enough, but it'll have to do for now. So I want to thank you for joining.
All right, John. Good talking to you as always. We'll check in next week.
All right. So remember www.kickassfantasyfootball.com. Thanks a lot, guys.